Hi, welcome back to CST 110. In this lesson, we're going to be talking about creating an informative speech. Now, in Chapter 1, we made the case for why you might need public speaking in your everyday life. And in Chapter 2 and in Chapter 3, we talked about the ethics of public speaking and how to be a critical listener. In this particular lesson, in this particular chapter, Chapter 4, we are talking about how to structure and deliver a short, informative speech. So what is a short, informative speech? Now, for us, it will be 2, maybe 3 minutes, and that would translate into perhaps 250 to 350 words. And as an informative speech, you're simply telling some people something that you think they would want to know about. Now, since this is a short speech, it's going to be kind of important to think about what the topic would be and whether or not you can treat that topic well in a short speech. For example, if you want to talk about the impact of diabetes in your life, perhaps you're a diabetic and you would like to talk about the impact of diabetes, that would be too broad a topic. You would want to narrow the focus of that topic to work within the time parameters of this speech. So instead of talking about the impact of diabetes on your life, you may talk about what it is like the first 2 or 3 hours of your day if you're a diabetic. So keep the focus on something that you can do a treatment of in 2 to 3 minutes. So what is the basic structure of an informative speech? Well, we would begin with an attention getter and follow that with a basic introduction, a preview of the speech that's going to take place. You would look at the body, the main content of the speech, and then finally you would wrap it up with a conclusion. So let's talk about each of those parts. Excuse me. Let's look at each of those parts in a little more detail. So what about an attention getter? What is an attention getter? Well, literally, its purpose is to get the attention of your audience. You're trying to get your audience to recognize that, hey, I'm beginning the speech now. It's time for you to focus on me. It's all about me right now, that sort of thing. So how can you do that? Well, perhaps you could ask a rhetorical question. What would you do if such and such? Maybe it might be, what would you do if you found your door ajar when you came home from work? Something like that. That would be a great attention getter because it allows your audience to start thinking about how they might answer that question, and it gets them focused on you and focused on the topic, on how you might answer that question yourself. You might tell a dramatic or suspenseful story. Some of you may be familiar with the radio personality Paul Harvey. He used to have a segment on the radio that was very, very popular called The Rest of the Story, where he would weave a tale, a very, very interesting story about someone and not tell you who that someone is, or weave an interesting story about a particular event and not tell you the particulars of what that event was until the very, very end. Then he would finally reveal who he was talking about or the event he was talking about, and it would be something that you were very familiar with. Maybe he was talking about a famous author or a famous battle in history, and you wouldn't know that that's what he was talking about until the very end, and you would learn so very, very much more about that topic because you were engaged in, I wonder who they're talking about, I wonder what this is about. Very dramatic, very suspenseful. It would be worth your while to spend some time on the internet listening to some of Paul Harvey's wonderful, wonderful commentaries. They're only 3 to 4 minutes long. You could begin a good attention getter might be a quotation or a joke. Joel Osteen, he is a TV evangelist. He always begins each sermon with a joke, I think, to tell his audience that, hey, it's time to begin, it's time to pay attention to me, here we go. You might startle your audience with a statistic of some sort. Maybe you're going to talk about the plight of hunger in America, and you would begin with a statistic about the amount of food wasted in the United States in any given day. Any sort of grab your attention kind of thing would be important to do, especially in a short speech, because you want to make every moment count. So after you've gotten your audience's attention, you want to introduce your topic. The introduction portion of a speech is primarily used to preview the body of the speech, to set the stage, and to give an overview of what you're going to be discussing. But another purpose of the introduction is to let your listener know why they should listen to you. You should let your listener know what qualifies you to give this speech. Perhaps you're going to be talking about producing honey, and you would want to mention that you've been keeping bees on your property for the last 5 years. Perhaps you're going to talk about the problems with polite dinner conversation in today's texting environment, and your bona fides, your credentials for talking about this topic might be that you've been a waitress and you've observed firsthand the problems with polite dinner conversation and the way it is deteriorated over time. So let your audience know why it is that you're the person that they want to listen to with regard to this particular topic. Now, when you give this speech, you're going to present your introduction before you present the body of the speech. However, you should often write the introduction after you have written the body, because remember, the purpose of the introduction is to preview what the body of the speech will entail, and it's best to create that introduction after you have carefully crafted the body. So it's okay to write the introduction after you've written the body, even though you'll deliver the introduction before you deliver the body. So what about the body of the speech? That's clearly the bulk of your speech, and so organization is going to be very, very important. Are you talking about a particular event where you're going to be in chronological order, or are you going to have particular points, particular topics, and you want to talk about each topic in a certain order? Whatever it is, the points that you make, you need to keep them short. Very few points in a very short speech, because you want to give each one of those points enough support, enough connectivity to the rest of the speech, and you don't want to just lay out tons and tons of information. Narrow it down, make sure that there's a lot of good information to support each one of your points. Make sure when you choose 2 points for your speech, then balance the time between what you're going to discuss with regard to those points. For example, if you're talking about beekeeping, you may talk about how to harvest the honey and also how to package the honey. Well, you want to give equal time to both of those components so that you don't give short shrift to just say the last part of the topic. Make sure that you support all of the items within your speech and that you connect those items to one another. And finally, the conclusion. Make sure that you transition between the body of the speech and the conclusion. You might want to say something like, in conclusion, such and such, such and such. Or finally, such and such, such and such. Make sure that your audience is following along and kind of understands that, hey, we're wrapping up here. I'm going to circle back and hit the main points and sort of tie a little bow around everything. You want to keep the conclusion brief. It should only be 5, maybe 10% of the total length of your speech. And again, it should try to cycle back to the attention getter or cycle back to the introduction in some way so that everyone sees that loop close. And in that speech strong, the conclusion always needs to have some sort of punch. Now, for more information, you can read the pages of your textbook. Chapter 4 of your textbook gives a lot of good information about writing and an informative speech. You can also, I've given you a couple of sample speeches that you can look at. One of them is on YouTube. It is a student's speech on phobias. It's done very well, and you can see each one of those pieces of the speech, parts of the speech happening. And also on TED Talks. TED Talks are one of my favorite sites for good speeches. You can see Nyla for Merchant's Got a Meeting speech, and she recommends that you take a walk when you have your meetings. This speech is really quite good, and it's really very brief. So these are two really good short speeches highlighting some of that structure. And good luck with your speech. If you've got any questions, give me a holler.